Well, hey everybody, and welcome back to Tactical Review. You see that today I have a very special guest with me. This is my daughter Trinity. Trinity, why don't you say hi to everybody at home?
Hi.
So, as you can see, I'm still in my Sunday best. We got back from church here a little while ago, and I thought it was a really good opportunity to make a video talking about a question that Trinity asked me a few months back. Trinity and one of my other daughters have been coming to the range with me. We've been talking about firearm safety, haven't we? And we've been talking, obviously Trinity's younger, we've been talking about the fun parts, the bonding, the target shooting, that aspect of shooting. But of course Trinity knows that I carry a handgun as often as I can or let me rephrase that, as often as I'm legally able to for defense. And so a little while back she said, well, Daddy, is it okay for a Christian to shoot another person? And I knew what my answer was, but I needed some time to dig in and get into the Bible and find a good way to explain all this. And so in explaining to Trinity, I thought it actually might be helpful to talk to all of you all as well. So I will be getting into the Bible. You might want to just go ahead and turn this video off if you find that to be offensive. That's your right. I'm not offended that you're offended. Everybody has to make their own choice in that matter. But I think that you might find that there's some aspects of this when I look at this from a biblical perspective, and I'm referencing to a Bible that you can't see. It's down here on the table. But you may find that some of this biblical perspective actually crosses over really amazingly into conversations that you might have with anti-gun friends, co-workers, and so on and so forth. So let's get into this, and where I want to start with, no, that's great English, and I'm going to leave it on just to prove how big smart I am. So what I'm going to start with is the kind of typical pacifistic viewpoint that I hear, and the two things that get quoted all the time when somebody tries to tell me that it's wrong of me as a Christian to be prepared to use lethal force. And the first place, we go clear back into Exodus chapter 20, and that's where the Ten Commandments are laid out. Well, one of the places. They're also laid out again later in the Old Testament, but they're worded the same. And we go through, I'm not going to read all of the Ten Commandments, that's not entirely the point of this, but then we get to the sixth commandment, and in this version, it's the Common English Bible. It simply says, do not kill. So there'll be a lot of people, well, the Bible says do not kill. It's not okay for you to say you're a Christian and carry a handgun. It's not okay for you to say you're a Christian and have a gun to defend your home. Okay. All right, we're going to come back to that. And then the other thing that will be brought up is in the New Testament, in Matthew chapter 5, we actually have it's one of the longest collections of one teaching of Jesus, and we call that the Sermon on the Mount. And in verses 21 through 26, Jesus talks about murder, and he says, you've heard it said, let me just read it here. You've heard that it was said to those who lived long ago, don't commit murder, and all who commit murder will be in danger of judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with their brother or sister will be in danger of judgment. And he goes on from there. And then he has, further down in verses 38 through 41, It's a section we call the law of retaliation, where Jesus says, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you that you must not oppose those who want to hurt you." Ooh, that's interesting. We'll come back to that. "If people slap you on your right cheek, you must turn the left cheek to them as well. When they wish to haul you to court and take your shirt, let them have your cloak too. When they force you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Give to those who ask, and don't refuse those who wish to borrow from you." So it sounds like a Christian pacifist, if you will, or somebody who is wanting to attack, if indeed you are a Christian, and they're wanting to attack your Christianity and say that it's in opposition to your Second Amendment rights. They seem to have pretty good biblical standing on that. So do we just close this down and we end this video here in just a couple minutes and say that it's not okay? Is that where we're going to end this, you think? No, that's not where we're going to end it. No, because I think that it goes well beyond that. And again, in gathering my thoughts, I did a quick Google search. It's amazing what you can turn up. And I found 2 articles from coldcasechristianity.com. One of them is "What's the Christian Position Related to the Use of Deadly Force?" And then they have the 10 principles for the reluctant use of deadly force. And both of those start, and they're both from around Memorial Day. And they kind of focus on more of the military aspect. And the Bible has a lot to say, or kind of not to say, about military. It's really outside what we're talking about here. And then I also found an article by Pastor Barrett Fallbush titled, "Are Christians Biblically Justified to Defend Themselves Using Lethal Force?" So those are a couple of really good resources that I found to help myself gather and focus my thoughts. And so I want to go back now here to the 10 Commandments. And I want to first say that English is a little bit of a trash language. You know that? It's got a little bit of, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that and some of the other thing. And we have words that are rooted in German, words that are rooted in Latin, words that are rooted in Latinate languages such as French and Spanish, and we just have a little bit of everything. And sometimes our language is really wishy-washy. Okay, here's a great example. In Greek, especially in Greek that was in common usage during the New Testament time, they had 4 words for love. They had one word that meant like a romantic love. It's actually eros. And it's where we get our word erotic from. When your teenager comes home and says that he or she is just in love, probably they mean eros. And we have the word philo, which is brotherly love. I got your back, right? Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. And they had a 3rd word for love, and it's escaping me right now, but it was like a familial love. And I think it might have been philo. I should look this up. As a matter of fact, probably on screen by the time you watch this, I will have corrected myself here. And then finally they have agape love, which is self-sacrificing love. What's my point? Well, my point is that in English we have love. Okay? I love pizza. I love my wife. Did I just say the same thing? No, I did not. But I used the same word. That's an important distinction to make, because when we have something like in Exodus chapter 20, verse 13, where it says, "Do not kill," we need to look at, in the original language, in the Hebrew, in the case of the Old Testament, That's a very simplistic rendering, and there was a lot more in the original language. The original language really meant to not kill with malice, or to not murder would be a better rendering of that. It's not prohibiting using lethal force to protect oneself. Okay, and let's move on. We're going to look at some verses here in Exodus chapter 22. Let's see, here we go. In verse 2, 22, verse 2, if the thief, now, okay, so we in verse 1 we were talking about a thief, and in verse 2 then it goes on, if the thief is caught breaking in and is beaten and dies, the one who killed him won't be guilty of bloodshed. Well, let's dissect that a little bit here, because that just kind of went 0 to 60 in a half a second. And then in verse 3, it goes on, it says, if it happens in broad daylight, that the person who killed the thief is guilty of bloodshed. Well, why would that be? Now, you have to think, I'm actually going to borrow from Pastor Fawbush in this. Back in biblical times, Surefire wasn't making 500 lumen torches to see who was breaking into your house and what they were doing. All right, and you might recognize that a lot of our modern castle doctrine is based on this. If somebody is coming into your home by force, you have a reasonable expectation that they are there to do you or your family bodily harm. In that moment, as they enter your home, legally, you have the right to exercise lethal force. Now, is it always the best option? There's no cut and dry. When we're talking about personal defense, there's not a cookie cutter. You have to use your own cues. But I'm here to tell you, the moment that person, after they've kicked in your door, while you're still trying to figure out what's going on and scramble to respond, and they grab your TV and start heading out, you are no longer justified in using lethal force. Why not? Because you are not in danger of death or egregious bodily harm. Okay, and that's exactly what it's saying here in Exodus chapter 22. If the thief breaks in the night, you can't tell what's going on, and you defend yourself. In this case, it's beaten and dies, but you're defending yourself and the thief dies, you're not guilty of murder. But in the daytime, when they break in and you can tell that they're a thief, see, again, we're talking about a thief here, you can see what's going on. It's during the day. If you beat that person for taking your stuff and they die, then you're guilty of murder. Okay, Pastor Fawbush breaks that down. And again, I'm going to put the links to my sources down below so that you can read them. The individuals who wrote these articles are very well written, and I really enjoyed reading these. What we need to do here, though, is we need to, when we're looking here at the Old Testament, we need to go back and we need to look at, in Genesis, it says that when God created Adam, the first man, Adam was created in God's image. Adam was a special creation, a unique creation, and there was a special importance placed upon that. As such, our fellow humans have intrinsic value because we're created in the image of God. So it weighs heavily if you are to take the light out of that image bearer. So the Hebrews had, and Judaism has this very sacred principle, and I'm probably going to butcher this. If you're a Hebrew speaker, I'm sorry. It is pikuach nefesh, or saving a life. If a person's life was in danger, or is in danger to a follower of Judaism, nearly all laws could be suspended save 3. idolatry, adultery, and murder. Okay, so what that means is if you're starving to death, if a Jew was starving to death and had to steal to make ends meet, that theft wasn't considered against the law. Now, we're not talking about stealing because a person wanted something. We're talking about stealing to save one's own life. Now, we're not going to get into the legal implications of that. I'm not telling you to, go out and kick over the till at your local McDonald's because you're hungry. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in the Jewish Old Testament culture, honestly, if somebody was starving to death in the community, it was a failing on the community. Somebody should have come along and valued that person's life to the point of offering them food. So that's why in Exodus it says, look, if they're coming in the night, you have to assume they have bad intentions. If they come in the day and grab something to eat, let them have it. Okay? So, in the Old Testament, we can see at least this one example where there was a justifiable death. But what about the New Testament? Okay, so Jesus seemed pretty stern here when he said, I'm telling you, even if you even hate somebody, you've already murdered them. So what do you think? Now, the Old Testament said that sometimes it's okay, if you are protecting yourself and the person who was breaking in died, it was okay. But Jesus says if you hate somebody, you've already killed them in your heart. You think Jesus is saying something different? Did Jesus say things that were different than the Old Testament? Ooh. Uh-oh. Looks like Dad's failed a little bit here. Okay, no, Jesus said, I didn't come to abolish the law. I came to fulfill all of the law. Okay? So, we're actually studying this very section in my junior high Sunday school class right now. So, it's really awesome that that's actually how this all ties, one of the places that this all ties together. Because what Jesus was saying is that the heart of murder is hatred. Now, I would expand on that and say, jealousy in your heart could also lead to murder. But Jesus is saying the heart of the matter, the Israelites, by the time of the New Testament, had gotten very traditionalist and very legalistic. Do this, do this, do this, do this, and then you'll get to heaven. And Jesus was saying, wait a minute, no. No, God cares about the heart of the situation. Okay, and again, Pastor Fallbush, he makes an example. He said, if I walk into a bank and I look around and I say, wow, this is a good target of opportunity, I'm going to rob the bank. And then all of a sudden, the armed security guard comes out of the restroom and I say, you know what, I'm not going to rob the bank. God isn't impressed with my self-control to not rob the bank because I was planning to do it. And I realized that I was at threat of great bodily harm. Okay? So what Jesus is saying as we go through here in Matthew chapter 5 is he's talking about all of the evil. Following a list of rules isn't the point because it comes from our heart. Matter of fact, the Old Testament says the same thing. Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart of man is deceitful and wicked. Who can know it? It's also the very reason that extra firearm legislation isn't going to magically make murder and violence disappear. If legitimately that was a thing that could happen, I might consider forfeiting my Second Amendment rights. But the fact of the matter is, it won't. Because evil comes from the heart, not from the handgun. Alright? Anyway, so, Jesus says here though, don't commit murder or you're in danger of judgment. And then he says, hatred is the start of murder. So really, that section there, if somebody comes to you and says, well, Jesus said even if you hate somebody, you've already killed them, that's not talking about self-defense at all. Okay, that's Jesus saying you got to look to the heart of the matter. But what about down here where Jesus says, I say that you must not oppose those who want to hurt you. If someone slaps you on your right cheek, you must turn the left cheek. When they wish to haul you to court and take your shirt, let them have your coat too. When they force you to go 1 mile with them, go 2. So it sounds like here he's completely shutting it down. Don't oppose those who want to hurt you. Well, I have to say that, again, it comes down to a little bit of a misunderstanding of the culture of the day. So much about Jesus' ministry and what's written in the New Testament makes so much more sense if you become a student of history and you learn a little bit about the culture of the Middle East at the time that this was all written. So let's think through this. All right, for somebody to slap you on your right cheek, so this side. Here, Trinity, turn to me. I'm not going to slap you, but we're going to go through this. Now, it's also important to know that the Israelites considered the left hand to be an unclean and a dirty hand because, how do I put this delicately? Do you know what they used their left hand for in old time? Your left hand was used to clean up after you went to the restroom. Okay? So you wouldn't eat with your left hand. You didn't do things with your left hand because it was dirty. Like, dirty. Dirty. Alright, so we're not using our left hand. Now, this is the right side of your face, right? If I'm going to slap you on the right side of your face, and I'm not going to use my left hand, I'd have to backhand you, right? Okay? That's important. Again, culture plays into this. If you're not going to study history and you're not going to study the culture, so much of the Bible won't make sense when you're going to take it out of context. So, if to backhand somebody, you're not going in with an intention to cause egregious bodily harm. As a matter of fact, you're going in to cause egregious harm to a person's pride. All right? To backhand somebody in this culture was to basically spit in their face. All right? And so what Jesus is saying here is, don't bow up and start going about how big and bad you are. Don't react out of pride. Instead, say, you get this side too. You get this side too. Right? It's more of a thing of don't retaliate and don't fight. It's about having a humble spirit because the text never talks about whether or not the insult had been earned in any way. All it talks about is what a Christ-like response to that insult is. And then when it goes on, when they wish to haul you to court and take your shirt, let them have your coat too. It never discusses if you're being sued wrongly. In fact, it almost says, to me it reads like, and I could be wrong, it reads like, no, you really owed a debt, and the proper payment for that debt would be your shirt. So go the extra mile. Because you've incurred a debt, offer them interest. Give them a kind word. Give them a kind deed to show that you have a contrite heart. All right. When they force you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Well, now we're getting into a completely different thing, because Roman soldiers would just grab somebody and say, hey, carry my gear for 1 mile. Carry my gear for 5 miles. And the Israelites had to do it. The Romans were in charge, and you just had to do it. So once again, it's this attitude of gentleness, this attitude of kind of being a good person, going above and beyond, being quietly different. Oh, sure. Hey, you know what? You said 1 mile, but I'll carry it another one. It's no problem. All right. So, does the Sermon on the Mount dismiss a Christian's ability to use lethal force if it's needed? I don't believe so. And in fact, if we go on through the New Testament, we see things such as, for those who know to do right and don't do it, it's a sin. So, let's just bring this together, because this can get very long. In fact, it's already pretty long. I think Trinity's really bored, and I don't even know if I've answered her question yet. So let's start trying to bring this together. And let's look at a couple things that I've already mentioned. 1, a person is the image bearer of God. 2, God considers that to be important. 3, God did say, do not murder. 4, God put forth in Exodus chapter 22 that if somebody's breaking into your home, you can defend yourself. Because if you don't know why they're there, you have to assume that they're there to kill, maim, murder, destroy, rape, pillage, etc. And if they die, they die. 5, we get into the New Testament, and Jesus never contradicted that. As a matter of fact, elsewhere he says, if you don't have a sword, sell your coat and buy one. Okay, now we're not going to get into any other implications, whether or not it was an example, but we did see Peter cut off the high priest's servant's ear. Jesus wasn't surprised that Peter was walking around carrying a sword. Jesus didn't yell at Peter to, why do you have that? Are you crazy? You're my follower. You're not allowed to have a sword. No. No. Jesus said, put it away. Now's not the time. And then he healed the high priest's servant. He didn't say get rid of it. He didn't say you never should have had that. He said now's not the time. Put it away. So all of that put together tells me that when my little children are image bearers of our great God, the sin is not to be willing to defend them up to and including lethal force. The sin would be to not defend them. For him who knows to do right and does it not, that is a sin. Men, women, especially if you're a Christian, I feel like you have even a responsibility to be willing to stand in that gap. Not to be a violent person, okay? Do we all get angry? Sure. Do we sometimes express it poorly? Sure. But I'm not saying that your lifestyle should be one of violence. In fact, I think that that is unbiblical. Matter of fact, when we look where it talks about the fruits of the Spirit, it gets juxtaposed with some like fruits of the flesh, if you will, and quarreling, and that's part of that. Your violence should not be the earmark of your life. Those who know you best should know you as gentle but firm. So what I'm saying is, day to day, I want to be a dad that my kids are just, they love to come up and hug. Day to day, I want their experience with firearms to be, yeah, Dad takes us to the range and it's a good time. I know how to safely handle one. I know that it's a tool that can be dangerous if I don't treat it with the proper respect. But I also want them to know that if somebody tries to visit violence on us, our daddy will become the Incredible Hulk and visit violence such as they've only seen in their worst nightmares back upon them. And that goes for when I'm at work. I think I've mentioned before that I work at a school. When I'm at that school, I have something in the neighborhood of 600 children. Now, my school does have a student resource officer, and we've optioned to not allow staff members to go through training and be armed, and that is what it is. That's not this discussion. I've already spoken with our SRO. Armed or not armed, I have every intention on putting myself between an evil person and my 600 children at school, because I believe that's where my place is. Between the children and the people who are important to me and the evil that's in this world. Jesus said, "Greater love has no man than this, that he would lay his life down for his friends." So, maybe you think I'm completely wrong. That's fine. You can let me know in the comments. Did I answer your question? Did you fall asleep? I think she fell asleep. I hope you didn't fall asleep. I hope maybe I answered your question, because I took a little person's question and then answered a bunch of big people. So if you'll excuse me, the Bible says that sometimes when a person is trying to hurt other people, that it's okay to stand up to them with violence. And the Bible even says that when somebody is coming in and you don't know their purpose, if you defend yourself and they die, you're not guilty of murder. Does that break it down for you? All right. Well, in case it was all too long, I hope that broke it down for you. Hey, look, I'm glad you joined us today. I'm glad Trinity joined us. I'm not sure she's glad she joined us. I think she probably thinks that the range days are a lot more fun. I do too, a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I don't mind doing these, but going and getting trigger time is a lot more fun. Anyway, hey, speaking of trigger time, look, it's super important that you make sure that you're backing the organizations that are making sure that we still have our Second Amendment right. There's links below down in the description for the Firearms Policy Coalition, for the Second Amendment Foundation, and for Gun Owners of America. If you're not supporting those organizations, I would recommend that you give it some consideration. These are organizations that have shown a no-compromise attitude when dealing with political situations that concern our Second Amendment rights. And I firmly believe that the other 9 rights in the Bill of Rights are all built upon the foundation of the Second. If you liked what you saw, if you want to help out the channel, if you want to kick some money our way so we can get out on the range and not do these in-studio videos as much of a, or as little of a studio as this is, you can support us through Patreon. The link is on screen and down below, clickable in the description. If you're watching on Gunstreamer, we really appreciate your viewership, and you can support the channel directly on Gunstreamer through Contributus. The link's down in the corner, and I just have a basic 1-tier set up. You can start at $1 or support however you feel led. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, also don't forget to hit the notification bell. As a small channel, you definitely won't be informed that I've uploaded anything if you don't have your notifications turned on. Well, guys, thanks for joining us today. Until next time, shoot straight, stay safe.